want them to find, if anybody knows anybody, if anybody has any information, please help us and find out who did this to my stepmother, please.
As panhandlers to get the attention of their would-be victim. And we also want to caution the public about engaging with panhandlers.
I hit my window, and Jacqueline went to hand the money out, and the guy just leaned over and said, "Can I thank your wife?" And I said, "You can thank my wife." And within that split second, this guy commits to my wife.
In this video, we're looking at two shocking cases where ordinary nights turn deadly. In Baltimore, 2018, Jacqueline Smith was stabbed to death after what seemed like a random attack. But investigators later uncovered it wasn't strangers at all. It was a staged lie, and the real killer was someone she trusted. Then in Detroit, 2025, a summer pool party turned into chaos when 4 people were stabbed. Among the dead were Hussein Carey and a young mother, Tisha P. The twist? Police say the killer wasn't an outsider but someone they all knew, and it was caught on video. 2 cities. 2 stories. Both marked by betrayal and lives cut short. Let's get into it. On November 30, 2018, Valeria Smith celebrated her 28th birthday with her father, Keith, and her stepmother, Jacqueline. They laughed, danced, and took photos. An ordinary night out. But just before midnight, everything changed. Keith later claimed that while driving home, Jacqueline rolled down the window to help a woman holding a sign that read, "Please help me feed my baby." In seconds, a man appeared, stabbed Jacqueline, and fled. A frantic 911 call followed, but by the time doctors tried to save her, it was too late. Soon, Keith and Valeria were on TV, warning the public, "Be careful who you trust." The story spread nationwide. Even Oprah Winfrey said it made her think twice about giving money to strangers. But detectives weren't convinced. And as they dug deeper, the so-called Panhandler murder unraveled into one of the biggest hoaxes in Baltimore's history. A case of lies, betrayal, and a shocking twist no one saw coming. So, let's dive into the story of Jacqueline Smith and how a simple act of kindness was turned into a deadly scheme. It was just after 12:30 a.m. on December 1, 2018, when Baltimore's 911 dispatchers received a call that would send shockwaves through the city. On the other end of the line was Keith Smith, his voice trembling and panicked. He told operators that his wife, Jacqueline, had just been viciously stabbed by a stranger. According to Keith, she had rolled down her car window to help a woman holding a baby and a sign begging for food. Moments later, a man appeared, lunged toward the open window, and drove a knife into Jacqueline's chest. Inside the car, chaos erupted. In the back seat, Keith's 28-year-old daughter, Valeria, screamed as she watched her stepmother bleed out in the passenger seat. Keith pleaded for help, begging dispatchers to send paramedics immediately. The image was haunting. A family birthday night turned into a bloody nightmare in the blink of an eye. Emergency responders rushed Jacqueline to Johns Hopkins Hospital, but her wounds were catastrophic. She had been stabbed 5 times in the torso, with an additional cut on her arm, evidence that she had tried desperately to shield herself from the attack. Doctors fought to save her, but within 30 minutes, her life slipped away. By 1 a.m., Jacqueline Smith, a 54-year-old mother, wife, and accomplished engineer, was gone. As news spread, grief quickly gave way to fear. Within hours, Keith and Valeria stood before cameras, becoming the public face of the tragedy. They recounted the chilling story, a generous woman slain because she chose to trust strangers. Their warning was stern: don't roll down your window, don't give money to panhandlers, and don't let your kindness put your family in danger.
She waved her over to come on over to the car, and then out of nowhere, some guy came over while walking with her. And I hit my window, and Jacqueline went to hand the money out, and the guy just leaned over and said, "Can I thank your wife?" And I said, "You can thank my wife." And within that split second, this guy commits to stabbing my wife. It was horrific for something like that to happen. But I'm right now just absorbing all of it. I just want to let Baltimore know to be careful when you feel like you want to give, because you don't know what the intentions are of the person that you're giving to.
The public mourned a woman whose kindness had cost her life. Media outlets across the country amplified the Smiths' message. Sometimes compassion can be deadly. But behind the headlines and the tears, detectives began to feel a nagging unease. The story was powerful, emotional, and tragic, but it didn't add up. Small inconsistencies were already creeping in. And as investigators soon discovered, this heartbreaking tale of a random street crime was hiding something far more sinister. And if you're into true crime stories like this, Don't forget to subscribe. It helps us keep bringing you more. Jacqueline Smith was born on July 4, 1964 in Rhode Island. She grew up joyful, creative, and kind, a woman who always put others first. She built a successful career as an electrical engineer with the Department of Defense, but her proudest role was being a mother to two sons, one in college and the other serving in the U.S. Coast Guard. In 2014, she married Keith Smith, and together they were active in their church. Friends remembered her as powerful, generous, and selfless, the kind of woman who would stop to help anyone in need. That's what made her murder so devastating. Jacqueline's kindness wasn't just her nature, it became the very thing that cost her life. Within hours, the Baltimore Police Department issued warnings to the public. Officers urged residents to be cautious when interacting with panhandlers. They reminded people that not everyone on the street was who they appeared to be, and that danger could lurk behind even the most desperate plea for help.
As panhandlers, to get the attention of their would-be victim. And we also want to caution the public about engaging with panhandlers and recognizing the fact that not all of them have honest intent. Not all of them are in real need.
The warning spread quickly. Local news stations ran with it, but it didn't stop there. The story went national. Headlines described Baltimore as a city where even charity could get you killed. Talk shows, morning news anchors, and commentators everywhere debated the dangers of giving money to strangers. And then came a reaction that sent the story viral. Oprah Winfrey, one of the most trusted and influential voices in America, shared her thoughts on Twitter. She admitted that she herself had handed money to panhandlers 1,000 times, but after hearing what happened to Jacqueline, she would think twice before ever doing it again. That one tweet poured gasoline on the fire. Suddenly, Jacqueline's story wasn't just a local tragedy, it was a national cautionary tale. Across social media, people began sharing their own fears, vowing to never again roll down their car windows. For many, Jacqueline's death symbolized a cruel truth, that kindness could make you a target. In churches, neighborhoods, and city council meetings, the conversation shifted. Was Baltimore safe? Could you trust anyone on the street? The tragedy reinforced a narrative of fear, and the Smith family's warning, "Be careful who you trust," echoed across the country.
It makes me look at this whole world differently now. It makes me look at everything and everyone. Nothing is ever what it seems. And you just have to protect your family out here. I just want them to find, if anybody knows anybody, if anybody has any information, please help us and find out who did this to my stepmother, please.
But while the public was gripped with fear and sympathy, detectives on the inside were quietly troubled. The story was powerful, yes. Emotional, yes. But something about it didn't sit right. The more they dug, the more they began to suspect that the real danger wasn't lurking on Baltimore streets. It was sitting inside that car. On the night of the murder, police went straight to the 1000 block of Valley Street, the area Keith claimed the stabbing happened. They expected to find blood, footprints, or even discarded items. Instead, they found nothing. No witnesses. No weapon. Not even a trace of blood on the pavement. In fact, most of the houses on that block were vacant. Detectives knew from experience, this wasn't a place panhandlers were typically found. The next morning, investigators went back in daylight to canvass the neighborhood again. Still no evidence. No one had seen a desperate mother with a baby, no one had seen a man fleeing, no one had heard screams. The supposed crime scene was eerily quiet. Keith's Audi A7 was brought in for forensic processing. On the passenger side, the side Jacqueline had been sitting, investigators lifted fingerprints, but they all matched Keith. No foreign DNA, no signs of a stranger reaching in. Inside, they noticed 2 pairs of gloves, one set of black, another yellow rubber. They also found a broken acrylic fingernail lodged in the back seat. It belonged to Valeria. None of this fit with a violent robbery by panhandlers. At the same time, detectives began pulling surveillance footage from around the city. They tracked Keith, Jacqueline, and Valeria leaving the American Legion Hall around 11:45 p.m. But when they tried to follow the route Keith described, toward Valley Street, they hit a wall. Across more than 27 different cameras, Keith's Audi never appeared. No video placed the family anywhere near the supposed crime scene. This was a red flag. So investigators turned to the next best thing: cell phone data. Keith's phone showed no movement that night until his 911 call. But Valeria's phone told a different story. Cell tower pings revealed that after leaving the American Legion Hall, the family didn't drive south toward her home. Instead, they drove north. toward Druid Hill Park near the Maryland Zoo. According to the data, they stopped there for about 15 minutes. But neither Keith nor Valeria had ever mentioned this stop to police. Why would they lie about where they were that night? Adding to the mystery, detectives checked Jacqueline's stolen phone. Keith had insisted it was taken during the attack. But records showed her last activity was around 4 p.m. earlier that day, hours before the alleged stabbing. It looked like her phone had never even left her home. Detectives also checked pawn shops across Baltimore, searching for Jacqueline's missing necklace and purse. Nothing turned up. But then a week later they got a break. Jacqueline's credit card had been used. Investigators tracked it to 3 teenagers, who said they found her purse abandoned at a bus stop. And that bus stop? It was right along the path Keith and Valeria's phones placed them on, after leaving the American Legion, not the route Keith had sworn to police. Piece by piece the story was crumbling. The Panhandler attack that had terrified a nation wasn't backed by a shred of evidence. Instead, what detectives were uncovering was a trail of lies. The focus was shifting, and suspicion was beginning to settle not on faceless strangers in the night, but on the very people who had told the story. By early 2019, detectives had more than enough reason to doubt Keith and Valeria's story. The cell phone data, the missing evidence, the inconsistencies, it all pointed in one direction. And Keith could feel the walls closing in. At first, he tried to explain away the discrepancies. When police confronted him about the cell phone data showing the stop at Druid Hill Park, Keith changed his story. He claimed he had gotten lost that night and had parked briefly to look at photos from Valeria's birthday party. Investigators didn't buy it. His version of events kept shifting, and every change made him look more desperate. Not long after that interview, Keith made his move. On February 4, 2019, he quietly rented a moving truck, packed up his belongings and left Baltimore. Neighbors recalled how quickly it happened. One day he was there, the next gone. Soon after, Valeria followed, meeting him out of state. Detectives knew exactly what was happening. Keith was running. They tracked his movements as he tried to stay a step ahead. He switched cell phones and providers, even had one shipped to his daughter to dodge investigators. But no matter how much he tried to cover his tracks, law enforcement was still listening. Keith wasn't just moving, he was planning an escape. He tried to book flights, first to Canada, then to Cuba, but without a valid passport, both attempts failed. So he got creative. He learned that he could fly to the U.S. Virgin Islands using only a driver's license. At the same time, he was researching ways to slip into Mexico without going through an official border crossing. On March 1, 2019, Keith rented a car in Texas. Detectives knew it was now or never. He was within striking distance of the border. Just 2 days later, on March 3, police issued arrest warrants for both Keith and Valeria Smith. When Texas law enforcement finally caught up with them, Keith and Valeria were just 20 minutes from Mexico. The father and daughter who once stood before cameras warning Baltimore about dangerous panhandlers were now in handcuffs, accused of orchestrating one of the city's most elaborate hoaxes. For investigators, the arrests were a breakthrough. For the public, it was a shocking twist. The story that had sparked national fear, the tragic tale of a woman stabbed by strangers, was unraveling before everyone's eyes. And the people who had been at the center of the tragedy from the start were about to face the full weight of justice. With Keith and Valeria now in custody, detectives could finally pull back the curtain on what had really happened, and the truth was darker than anyone had imagined. Investigators learned that Keith's elaborate story about panhandlers wasn't just a cover-up, it was part of a bigger plan. At the time of Jacqueline's murder, Keith was still the beneficiary on her life insurance policy. Just 2 days after her death, he went to her workplace asking for the paperwork to file a claim. To police, this was a red flag. The grieving husband wasn't focused on mourning, he was already trying to cash in. Authorities quickly stepped in and froze the payout, giving Jacqueline's 2 sons time to fight for her estate in court. That wasn't all. Detectives uncovered Keith's troubled past. Nearly 20 years earlier, he had committed 3 armed robberies at the same Maryland bank. In 1999, after losing his job and struggling to pay bills as a single father, Keith turned to crime. Wearing a ski mask and armed with a pellet gun, he leapt over counters, grabbed cash, and made his escape. He pulled it off twice, but the third time ended in a car chase and his arrest. He served 6 years in prison. This history of desperation and deception painted a chilling picture. Keith was no stranger to crime when money got tight. And money was tight again in 2018. Jacqueline had reportedly been talking about a divorce, a prospect that would have left Keith without her support. For him, cashing in on her life insurance seemed like the easiest way out. Prosecutors would later argue that greed, mixed with fear of losing stability, pushed him to plan her murder. But what about Valeria? Why had she gone along with it? Valeria's story was complicated. Court records revealed she had struggled for years with bipolar disorder and a long battle with heroin addiction. Friends said she was deeply attached to her father and easily influenced by him. After the murder, she admitted to helping Keith dispose of evidence, including Jacqueline's purse and the knife. She even left one of the purses at a bus stop, where a group of teens later found it. When prosecutors confronted her, Valeria was offered a deal: plead guilty as an accessory after the fact and testify against her father. In exchange, she would avoid a lengthy prison sentence. Ultimately, she took the deal. For the prosecution, her testimony was the missing piece. It explained what really happened that night in Druid Hill Park. How Jacqueline, likely dozing off in the front seat after the birthday party, was multiple times by her own husband while Valeria sat helpless in the back. The heartbreaking irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman remembered for her generosity had been betrayed not by strangers, but by the people she trusted most. By late 2021, nearly 3 years after Jacqueline's death, the case finally went to trial. The courtroom was packed, family members, reporters, and community members all waiting to hear the truth behind the story that had once gripped the nation. The most dramatic moment came when Valeria Smith took the stand against her own father. Shaky but determined, she told the jury that after celebrating her birthday at the American Legion Hall, Keith had driven the family not toward her home, but to Druid Hill Park. Jacqueline, she said, had dozed off in the front passenger seat. That's when Keith pulled out a knife and stabbed his wife multiple times, killing her as she slept. Valeria admitted that she helped her father afterward, throwing away Jacqueline's belongings and repeating the fabricated Panhandler story to police and reporters. But she insisted she had been manipulated, pressured into silence, and terrified of defying her father. "I didn't want to go to prison for a murder I didn't commit," she told the jury. The defense tried to tear her apart, painting Valeria as an addict and a liar who was only testifying to save herself. But prosecutors countered with the evidence: the cell phone data, the abandoned purse, the life insurance scheme, and Keith's criminal past. Piece by piece, the story came together. In December 2021, the jury returned its verdict. Keith Smith was guilty of first-degree murder and a weapons charge. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, calling the crime selfish, calculated, and cruel. A month later, Valeria was sentenced as well. Under her plea deal, she received 5 years in prison for her role in helping cover up the murder. For Jacqueline's family, the verdicts brought a mix of relief and sorrow. Her mother, who had never believed Keith's story from the beginning, told reporters she felt vindicated. "I knew it was a lie. I knew something else happened. And I knew this day would come."
I knew it was phony. I didn't believe her husband at all. I knew something else happened. Why would he stay in the area with her in the car after the man pulled the chain from her neck, as he claims? It was too phony.
Jacqueline's sons described her as their hero, a woman of faith, strength, and compassion whose memory they would carry forward. To them, justice had finally been served, but the pain of losing her in such a brutal way would never fade. The case closed with a bitter truth: the story that once terrified a nation was nothing more than a cruel hoax. Jacqueline Smith wasn't killed by strangers on the street. She was betrayed by the man who vowed to love her, and by the daughter she tried to accept as her own. On August 9, 2025, chaos broke out on Fleming Street near 7 Mile, leaving 4 people stabbed. 2 of them didn't survive. Among the victims was Hussein Carey, who just hours earlier was promoting the very party that would cost him his life. Another life cut short was that of a young woman known as Tisha P., brutally attacked in front of everyone. The shocking part? Police say the killer was someone they all knew, and the entire scene was caught on video. So what really happened that night, and why did it turn deadly? Let's break it down. One of the victims that night was Tisha P., a young mother who absolutely adored her child. Friends described her as full of life, always smiling, and the type of person who never looked for trouble. But that night, she would end up losing her life in the most brutal way, stabbed to death at what was supposed to be just another summer pool party. Another victim was Hussein Carey, a proud father who had everything going for him. He was the type of man who worked hard, looked after his child, and had a promising future ahead. On the very morning of the party, Hussein was on social media promoting the event with excitement, completely unaware that his own friend, the very man standing next to him in those videos, would end his life before the night was over. Hussein's post from that day painted a chilling picture. Early on, he shared messages about cryptocurrency, saying BTC finna go up. Later, he posted another one, "Respect my thing is all I am asking." To anyone scrolling past, those were just regular updates. But looking back now, they feel like eerie foreshadowing of the violence to come. As the evening went on, the pool party was in full swing. Music, laughter, people dancing and enjoying the summer night. Hussein looked happy, completely at ease until things took a dark turn. The man who would later kill both him and Tisha was Daiwan Lemony Hobson, also known as Juan Hobson. What makes this even more disturbing is that Juan had just been released from prison barely a month earlier. Court records show he had a violent history, including trying to kill another woman, and was out on probation. He wasn't even supposed to be at that party. Yet there he was, not only showing up but bringing his own mother along to an event packed with young men and women. According to reports, the chaos started when Tisha, who had been drinking, accidentally stepped on Juan's mother. It seemed like a small mistake, but it escalated into a heated argument. Witnesses say Juan believed Tisha and her friends were trying to gang up on his mother, and in his rage, he completely snapped. Video clips from that night show the party atmosphere turning into sheer panic. Screaming, chaos, and then the unthinkable, Juan pulled out a knife and went on a stabbing spree. By the time it was over, 4 people had been stabbed. Tisha and Hussein didn't make it out alive. 2 others were rushed to the hospital, one in critical condition, the other in stable condition. Police say Juan lost control that night, but for the families of Tisha and Hussein, that explanation will never be enough. A night that should have been filled with joy turned into horror, all because of one man's rage. In the aftermath of the tragedy, a lot of people had their own version of what really went down that night. On social media, heated debates broke out. Some argued that Juan was simply defending his mother, claiming she was being jumped by a group of young women. Others, however, didn't buy that excuse, pointing out that the level of violence he unleashed went far beyond self-defense. One person who claimed to be at the party shared their account, writing, "I was there. The boy hit a girl first because the girl was drunk and starting stuff with his mama. In nobody's defense, the guy tried to avoid it from the jump. He is not wrong." That same person added more details, saying, "Yeah, the girl was drunk. She kept bumping into his mama and all he did was ask if she was okay and kind of moved her away. But then the girl instantly ran up on his mama, swung and missed. That's when he lost it. He wasn't having any of that." Now, whether you believe that version of events or not, it's clear that alcohol, tension, and poor judgment played a major role in this tragedy. What could have been a small misunderstanding spiraled completely out of control, leaving 2 people dead and 2 others hospitalized. Some witnesses insist Juan acted out of anger rather than protection, pointing to his violent history and the fact that he should not have even been at the party in the first place. Others hold firm that the chaos began when things escalated between the women. But one thing is certain, nothing can bring back Hussein Carey or Tisha P. Both were young, both had children, and both had entire futures ahead of them that were stolen in an instant. Our heartfelt condolences go out to their families and loved ones who are left to carry this pain. May their souls rest in peace. This story is a tragic reminder of how quickly things can spiral when tempers flare and alcohol is involved. Please stay safe out there and we shall see you guys in the next video.